The number of people killed in the latest Russian attack in Kyiv has increased. The Vatican is set to canonize an influencer, and who is Trump expecting as a guest? All this and more today on TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave your comments on everything you see. And here are a few more topics from today's episode. An Iskander missile at the Cabinet of Ministers, Shaheds targeting the energy sector. What is known about the new Russian attacks and where people have already been left without gas in their homes. A ballistic Iskander missile struck the building of the Ukrainian Cabinet of Ministers. This was reported by EU Ambassador Katerina Maternova after her visit to the government institution. Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko and Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha showed the consequences of the Russian shelling to 60 heads of diplomatic missions accredited in Ukraine. They were shown the remains of the cluster munition and numerous fragments that were inside. It was precisely because the missile did not fully detonate and thanks to the quick actions of the emergency services, Maternova noted, that the building was not completely destroyed. Putin knows exactly what he is doing. The Iskander ballistic missile that struck the Cabinet of Ministers was aimed directly there, at the heart of the Ukrainian government, Maternova wrote, calling on allies to increase pressure on Russia and, conversely, to help Ukraine. At the site of the Russian attack on the Cabinet of Ministers, efforts to eliminate the consequences are ongoing. Roof repair work will begin soon. According to Sviridenko, for Ukraine, the attack on the night of September 7th marks a new stage in the war, as the enemy has effectively doubled the number of Shahed drones used in strikes against civilians and energy infrastructure on the eve of winter. In this way, the Russians once again confirm that they do not want peace, the Prime Minister noted, adding that this is also a signal that the aggressor country is mocking the diplomatic efforts of the entire civilized world. The Russians dropped 2 guided aerial bombs on residential areas of Kramatorsk in the Donetsk region. At present, it is known that at least 2 people have been injured. They are a man and a woman. However, the final number of victims may change as the ruins of the buildings are still being examined. Police officers, paramedics, and the National Police Evacuation Team White Angels provided first aid to the wounded at the scene and are transporting them to safer locations. Fires are raging at the sites of the strikes, and rescuers are working to extinguish them.
Please, show me your legs. It is always better to press any type of fabric before you begin.
Yes.
Just hold on, and you have to go and get stitches. Yes, stitches will be needed, but they will be superficial stitches.
State emergency service workers are extinguishing the fire. Donetsk Oblast police paramedics provide assistance to civilians injured in shelling. The investigative team is documenting the aftermath of this strike. This is a multi-story residential area. Buildings are damaged, windows shattered, doors blown out of people's homes.
The Russians have once again struck the enrichment plant of a fuel and energy company in Donetsk region. At present, its operations are completely paralyzed. The enterprise and its equipment have been destroyed. The occupiers attacked the village of Novodonetsk with Garan 2 attack drones hitting a residential house. The homeowner, a pensioner, and his daughter died from their injuries. 2 more people were injured. 2 residents of Sloviansk and Toretsk also did not survive the enemy strikes. Russian forces launched an airstrike on the village of Voronezh in the Sumy region, destroying an infrastructure facility. The city of Shostka and the surrounding district are without power. Energy workers are working on restoration. Backup power has been used to provide water supply. The day before, the enemy attacked the center of Sumy twice. 4 people were injured, including 2 children. At dawn, the Russians dropped explosives from a drone on the Dnipro district of Kherson. A 30-year-old city resident was injured. And at night, the war criminals once again remotely mined residential neighborhoods of the regional center. People are being urged to be extremely cautious as anti-personnel petal mines are scattered across the streets. The day before, a man was injured by just such a mine. He is in the hospital. A 6-year-old girl and a man were wounded by the occupiers in Kupiansk, Kharkiv region. This happened during a mortar shelling of the city. The region was also attacked by drones and multiple rocket launch systems. Russia launched a massive attack on one of the thermal power facilities in the Kyiv region, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Energy. The main goal is to leave Ukrainian homes, hospitals, kindergartens, and schools without light and heat. The enemy clearly understands that they are targeting critical civilian infrastructure, the ministry emphasizes. Monitoring Telegram channels report that drones attacked the Trypilska thermal power plant. Last April, Russian missiles severely damaged the Ukrainian power plant. And as a result of today's shelling, parts of the Kyiv region experienced power outages during the night. By morning, there were no emergency power outages, according to the regional administration. However, 8 settlements in the Obukiv district have been left without gas. Emergency repairs to the gas network damaged by the shelling will continue for 2 days. Gas supply will be cut off for more than 8,000 subscribers, including those in Kozin, Ukrenka, and Trypillia. He is unhappy about everything that is happening. This is how the President of the United States responded to a question about the continued Russian airstrikes on civilian infrastructure and peaceful residents of Ukraine. He did not criticize Russia and said that he would speak with Putin by phone in the coming days and that some European leaders would visit him this week to discuss the situation. The White House has not yet responded to journalists' questions about exactly who is expected. There were no international negotiations scheduled in Donald Trump's public agenda for Monday. The European Union is preparing to impose new sanctions against Russia. The 19th package is expected to be presented at the end of the week, according to Politico. Brussels may synchronize these steps with Washington, where the EU has already sent its delegation to maintain a unified sanctions front. This was stated by the European Commission. The President of the United States is signaling readiness to also increase pressure on Russia as the US and the European Union prepare to force an end to Putin's war, while he sets yet another negative record in the use of weapons against Ukraine. All the details are in the report by Radio Liberty correspondent Zoriana Stepanenko, prepared especially for TSN.
After a difficult discussion about sanctions at the hybrid summit of the coalition of willing countries, Brussels and Washington continue their talks on this issue at other levels, just as they had agreed. The EU's special envoy for sanctions, former ambassador to the US David O'Sullivan, has traveled to the American capital. The official will hold a series of meetings in Washington today and tomorrow. The EU expects the United States to increase pressure on Russia. The leader of one of the continent's leading countries, Chancellor Merkel, said that it is hardly possible to force Russia onto the path of diplomacy by military means and suggested focusing on economic measures instead. But when European leaders brought this up to President Trump last week, he pointed back at them, reminding them of the EU's purchases of Russian oil and, in the US president's view, the weak pressure on China. So far, the EU's sanctions against Beijing have been rather modest. The head of the European Commission, who had pointed out to the US president at the time the significant reduction in the EU's consumption of Russian oil in recent years, later continued this conversation by phone with the American vice president. Now, efforts are being made to synchronize sanctions policy at the delegation level.
We have a few very interesting discussions. You know, when they lose 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers a week for no reason, this needs to be resolved.
When do you precisely plan to speak with President Vladimir Putin next, in the near future?
Very soon, within the next few days. Listen, we'll sort this out. We will resolve the situation with Russia and Ukraine. I'm convinced of that.
Donald Trump, who expects concessions from both Russia and Ukraine to end the war, has postponed his own deadlines for the Kremlin several times. The latest one passed on September 1st. The delay with sanctions in Washington was explained by a reluctance to harm the negotiation process. But when the US president was asked yesterday, after yet another massive shelling of Ukraine that damaged the Cabinet of Ministers building, about his readiness to increase pressure on Russia, Trump replied that he was ready, without going into details. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the same thing, also emphasizing similar expectations from European partners. The 19th package of EU sanctions is currently in preparation. Consultations with member states are ongoing. This is the traditional alignment of positions. Who is ready to support what? This takes place before the official presentation of the package by the European Commission. Sources from EU diplomatic circles, speaking to Radio Liberty on condition of anonymity, said that a blow is being prepared against Russia's energy and financial sectors. There will be an attempt to introduce secondary restrictions, as well as an effort to limit the number of Russian diplomats here and to stop issuing tourist visas to Russians. Regarding the latter, our interlocutors doubt whether it will succeed. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Liberty, especially for TSN 1+1.
A woman who was injured as a result of a strike in the Sviatoshinsky district of Kyiv has given birth to a son. The mother herself remains in serious condition. On the night before Sunday, a Shahed drone struck a 9-story apartment building in a residential district of the capital. One of the injured was a 24-year-old pregnant woman. Doctors performed an emergency delivery on her. She gave birth to a son. Rescue operations at this location have already been completed. Another Russian terrorist attack claimed the lives of a man, a woman, and an infant. Several apartments were completely destroyed and dozens more were damaged. Today, representatives of the local authorities met with the victims to discuss compensation payments. The broken windows have already been covered with plastic film or wooden panels. Along with utility workers, residents of the damaged buildings and their neighbors joined in cleaning up the yard.
I got involved because I live here myself so that our children can walk around.
In the near future, we will finish the emergency repair work because we have already cut down and removed almost all the dangerous structures. And we are trying to ensure that not only utility services, but also the relevant commission and the people who live here can access their premises as soon as possible.
In the Kyiv region, as a result of a Russian attack on the night of September 7th, 7 horses were killed. The equestrian club was attacked by Russian Shaheds. The animals died on the spot from the strike. These were elite breed sport horses that had repeatedly participated in national and international competitions. Natalia Tkachuk will tell us how the stable is recovering after the attack.
At night, there were 3 direct hits that occurred during the incident. There are craters there.
Yulia Tolpiha, the owner of the equestrian club, shows the place that was attacked by the Russians on the night of September 7th, where her beloved animals were killed.
Here's the stable, and this is where the horses used to walk. In the evening, we would let them out because it's hot during the day, cooler at night, and often they would stay outside overnight.
3 attack drones. On the debris left at the impact sites, their name was written, Geran. Yulia remembers that night with horror.
I was at home. I live here 50 meters from this stable. The first explosion happened. I jumped up. My dogs were in the yard, so I ran to get them, and then the second wave, when the next strike hit, knocked me off my feet.
When Yulia ran to the equestrian club, it became clear that the animals could no longer be saved.
Their legs were broken, there were holes in their veins all over their bodies. In other words, the horses had no chance of survival.
Sport horses of elite breeds. Their names were Ramarcel, Test, Freely, Bospor, Mektum, Malakita, and Ranazran. They had repeatedly participated in national and international competitions and were very promising.
Bospor competed in a tournament just yesterday. And there was a mare we rescued back in 2022. We evacuated her from the occupation in Bucha. She stayed to live with us, but indeed the war eventually caught up with her.
The horses' bodies were scattered, Yulia says, on different sides of the club. This shows that they were running, trying to save themselves, but the shockwave caught up with them.
There are many horses here that have stayed with me for many years. I'm sorry.
Only 2 horses remain at the riding club. 4-year-old Holly and 19-year-old Manuel spent the night in another area behind the stable and are still recovering from the stress. Holly hasn't been here long and she's usually used for children's training. Manuel, affectionately called Masha, is an old-timer. She moved to Ukraine more than 15 years ago.
We once brought her from Russia. That is, she's a pedigree mare.
At the time of the attack, there were also 4 people on the riding club's grounds, stable hands and trainers. Among them was Lydia, who, upon hearing the approaching Shahed drones, immediately realized they needed to take cover.
I can really hear the impacts. I used to shoot them down myself. I heard that altered sound, that it had been hit, it was about to fall. And I just shouted, "Get down!" And then 1 boom, then a second boom, then a third boom. I ran out into the street. It was very frightening. There were horse corpses lying everywhere.
Lydia is an experienced coach and athlete. She has been engaged in horseback riding for almost 30 years. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, she stood up to defend the country and joined the women's mobile air defense group, Bucha Witches.
Since July 1st, I no longer serve because my job didn't allow it. That is, the horses, well, as if the horses would still be with us. With every horse that died, it felt like a piece of my heart was lost because I had worked with all of them.
The blast wave shattered the windows in the stables of the equestrian club. Now, in the rooms that were not damaged, 3 dogs have been housed. During the attack, they were near the horses and miraculously survived.
This one got a neck wound, but, the bleeding was stopped.
Bucha, who was evacuated from the city after the Russian occupation in 2022, got away with just a fright. The oldest 12-year-old Malchik was also lucky. That's the dog's name.
He was pulled out from under the rubble. That is to say, precisely where the initial impact crater was located, that's exactly where he was positioned. And remarkably, he somehow managed to survive the ordeal.
Yulia is getting help cleaning up the aftermath of the Russian attack from club staff, visitors and volunteers. The police inspected and took away the drones, but the huge craters left by the UAVs remain. Despite the fact that the Russians inflicted irreparable losses on the club, the owner says she doesn't plan to give up and will eventually buy new horses.
We will rebuild because this is our life. Horses are our life.
Natalia Tkachuk, Roman Repa, TSN 1+1.
The first Holy Millennial God's influencer. The Pope has canonized 15-year-old teenager Carlo Acutis. The ceremony was originally planned by the previous pontiff, Francis, but it was postponed due to his death. And just recently it was Leo XIV who performed the ceremony at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. Tens of thousands of believers came to witness the event. The Italian teenager Carlo Acutis was born in London in the early 90s, was passionate about technology and computer games, and was a devout person. Throughout his short life, the teenager actively spread the ideas of Catholic teaching via the internet and even created a catalog of Eucharistic miracles, for which he earned the nickname God's Influencer. At the age of 15, Carlo died from a severe form of leukemia. The boy's body, covered in wax and preserved in an incorrupt state, was buried in the Italian city of Assisi. Every year, Catholic pilgrims travel there. For a long time, Carlo's mother tried to achieve his canonization, and this was only accomplished after the confirmation of so-called religious miracles. In particular, it is claimed that touching his relics healed an infant with a pancreatic disorder and a Florentine student who had suffered a brain hemorrhage after a head injury.